you have people that would prefer to pick up the phone. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that are nervous to talk on the phone or nervous to call people, right?
Welcome to Digital Dominance. I went from building HTML websites in high school to helping 7- and 8-figure service businesses generate more revenue through better design, SEO, and marketing. On this podcast, I bring you expert tactics and tools to help you turn your online presence into your biggest sales asset. If you want someone on your team to help you navigate the world of digital marketing, head over to FroBro.com. There's a business owner who figured out how to scale from literally zero revenue to $40 million in under 10 years. And he did it by focusing on something most home service owners completely ignore until it's too late. Today's guest is Randy Warner, founder and CEO of Adhesion Co. Randy isn't some tech guru selling you software. He's a 3-time Inc. 500 executive who's been in the trenches, scaling businesses from 5 employees to over 150. And now he helps home service owners break through those painful growth plateaus that keep you working 80-hour weeks for the same revenue year after year. So if you've ever felt like you're drowning in your own success, or you know you should be scaling but can't figure out how to get out of your own way, the next 25 minutes could transform how you run your business. Randy's going to share some of the exact automation strategies that turn chaotic owner-dependent businesses into profit-generating machines. So Randy, welcome to Digital Dominance.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here. Look forward to chatting.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. I think we should start with that incredible growth story. 5 to 150 plus employees, 0 to 40 million in less than 10 years. What went into that? What were the key systems and processes that made that possible?
So, full transparency: the 0 to 45 to 150 is not Adhesion. Adhesion's not quite there yet. Okay. That was a company called Hyperion Partners right before Adhesion that I spent about 6 years with. But a lot of the same principles that applied to that, right, are in the growing pains and the successes, but also the failures that I learned there, right, I've been able to bring over to Adhesion as well and help apply to Adhesion clients. That's a fun story, totally different industry. It was in the telecom industry. And with that, there was 6 of us around a kitchen table in one of the founders' houses. And by the time I left, we had a 32,000 square foot warehouse in Las Vegas and about 150 employees spread out across the U.S. With some folks internationally as well. At the time, and this is relevant because at the time when there was only 6 people around a table, everybody is a salesperson, right? And you're still figuring out how you're going to make money and whatnot. And so my background is actually in sales. I didn't get into this nerdy side of the business until about 2018. And I did it originally purely out of necessity because, we were 3 years into growing this company and we needed to get the right systems in place to be able to deliver and to be able to scale to the extent that we wanted to. And so just getting the foundational things in place from, a CRM to, an ERP system for delivery to, marketing systems to, sales automation systems, enabling clients to be able to place orders, more directly and accelerating fulfillment. All of those things were critically important. And the last 2 years that I was working with that company, implemented a full enterprise grade ERP system with NetSuite. And then, I've been working on building Adhesion since 2023 and working primarily with service-based businesses, with kind of, if you niche down a little bit more from service-based businesses, home service businesses. And I accidentally fell into that niche. I never set out to fall into that niche. But through a series of a few clients back to back, found that, obviously they have a lot of the same challenges and a lot of the same repeatable issues that are solvable. And I love what I do, but I don't look at what I do as like a technical delivery. I look at what I do as a problem-solving delivery, right? And really understanding those business operations that have some things that are holding them back, that prevent them from getting to that next level. And how do we solve that using technology? So a lot of the conversations I have are business conversations, and then the technical delivery behind the scenes. So I just dominated a lot of the time with that answer, but hopefully that helps clear some things up and kind of lay the groundwork for you here.
Yeah, well, that gives us some background. That means you've seen the scaling challenge from the inside, and now you're
Absolutely.
solving it from the outside with Adhesion Co. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the patterns that you see in the home service businesses you work with that are stuck?
The biggest one lately that I've been working to help people solve is effective lead follow up. Right. So put yourselves in the position of a customer. If you have, especially an emergency situation, right? You have a leak in your house and you need to call a plumber or contact a plumber, right? You head to Google Maps, right? End up
Mm-hmm.
on, you get hit with a lead service ad or a local service ad or whatever it might be, and you're not just going to call one, or you're not going to fill out you're not going to fill out a form on a website for one company. You're going to do it for three or four or five because you want to get that many bids, or you have an emergency situation. And oftentimes it's not about who is the cheapest or who is the best. Oftentimes in those situations, it's about who's the fastest,
It's the
right?
first who picks up when you've got a leak in your house.
Exactly. Right. And so helping these companies who oftentimes, depending on scale, you might have an owner who is still an operator who might be in the field in the middle of a day. Right. And so how can we implement systems to be able to, my goal right now is delivering something that enables people to respond in sub 2 minutes, right? Either a live answer or a response to an inquiry in less than 2 minutes. I don't know where I got 2 minutes. I think I heard that on somebody else's podcast, but that was like the magic number to be able to respond to something. Because some of these companies, I mean, you've probably seen this. You either never hear back from them, they call you back way late in the day, or maybe it's the next day. Well, when I need something, I need it right then and there. I think the world of Amazon and 2 day delivery or same day delivery has spoiled us, and we expect
Yep.
these service based businesses to respond the same way, right? And candidly, most of them don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that today.
Yeah, it's like microwave results. We want it now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously, it sounds like there's a lot of different things to work on and improve to get to that point. So if you're talking to someone who's doing maybe 500K to 2 million annually, where do you typically start with workflow automation? Is it there with the response time, or is it somewhere else?
That is one that most people typically struggle with, right? So if they come to me and they say, "How can you help?" I typically will focus in there, because any sort of integration and automation that can save time is helpful. It's not
Mm-hmm.
sexy, right?
Right.
So I prefer to focus on what I call like the lead to cash pipeline, right? Anything in the lead to cash pipeline that can get a customer from lead to money in the
Mm-hmm.
bank quicker has an exponential value compared to just, hey, I saved 10 hours over here, or I saved 20 hours over
Right.
here in part of my process. We can do that. It's not as sexy, right? But if I say, hey, I helped you close 10 more jobs this month because you were able to get back to leads quicker, they understand that much better than, hey, I helped you save 10 hours a month over here. Right? Nobody
Yeah.
likes to buy that. So I like to talk about the sexy things that make people more money. So it's this lead to cash pipeline and anywhere in there.
Yeah. So it's about framing it in terms of what they care about now, right? Or get excited about. Because a lot of people might hear automation and think it's either too expensive or too complicated. And so to help them get past that, you just focus on it's how you frame it, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
you're saving money, you're making money, more money because you're not wasting leads, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So there's that initial follow up with that lead, which is number one. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? If you think about this lead pipeline, you go from a lead to now, once you've contacted that lead, how do you get to a quote, right? And depending on the service business, some things you can quote sight unseen, depending on the particular industry. Some things you can quote sight
Right.
unseen, other things you can't quote sight unseen. So another thing that I've helped a number of companies do is be able to automate their quote delivery, right? And so if you
Nice.
can churn out more quotes, if you have a 50% close rate, a 40% close rate, whatever that means, as long as your close rate stays the same, the easiest way to increase your revenue is just to increase the volume of quotes that you're able to turn out, right? So
Yeah.
if we can go from, I'll use kind of a not very not very sexy business, right? But there's companies out there that'll go pick up your dog poop.
I had one on the show I talked to.
There you go, perfect, right? Yeah, and that's something that you can easily quote, right? You can say, roughly how big is your backyard, right? How many dogs do you have? And how many times a week do you want us to pick up, right? If you can have those three variables, you can calculate how much the service would be. And so we took it from they would have to call every prospective customer back to you can get a quote in your inbox in less than 30 seconds by answering these three questions, right?
Yeah.
That's a drastic difference between, hey, between houses, I have to call these people back, and I just had a system that sent out quotes to my customers without me doing anything. And I can also follow up with them after that quote went out. They got exactly what they wanted, which is a price. They know more about your service, and you got their contact information. Those are all three big wins that is way better than, hey, just put in your email address here and we'll get in touch, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. And I can hear some audience members thinking, but what I have to really see it because I don't know if there's like a deep stain in the carpet. That's going to be extra or blah, blah, blah. So if I were to answer that, I would guess you just put in some fine print that says, hey, if we get there and find out that this is not what you told us, then that's going to be an additional charge.
Yeah. There's a reason we have lawyers and terms and conditions for anything we do in life, right? And so, maybe at that point you ballpark the quote. Right? Starting at, right? There's a reason starting at language exists, but at least as the customer, I then know roughly what this is going to cost me, right?
Yeah.
That's better. That's better than the company that hasn't called me back at all, right? If I don't have the company that's called me back, but I know this guy who's already gotten to the point of I have a quote in front of me and I know what this is going to cost me. Maybe I even have a link that I can use to schedule that service, or provide, 2 days that would work with my schedule that I would like for to be booked on. Any of these things where you can give the customer that, I'll just call it that Amazon-like experience, right? Or that, Uber Eats-like experience to get exactly what you want based on your schedule, the better off you're going to be, because people have been trained that way.
Can you walk us through a quick specific example? Like maybe take a plumbing company. What does their day-to-day look like before and after implementing some of these systems that are, helping you be more efficient with the quoting and everything else?
You'd have to break it down into smaller things, right? So I'll use the quote thing for that's a real world example of, the dog poop company, right? The dog poop pickup company, right? And I'll use examples of like current systems, right? And so for them, before they had a website, they had a form on their website. And they used, are you familiar with Jobber as a field service management platform? Right. So they use Jobber. They have a form on their website, and those would dump into Jobber as requests. Then whenever they had time, they would have to call these requests back, schedule a time to go out and see what their, what their yard looked like, how many dogs they have, or maybe they don't go out, maybe they just talk to them, right? Either way, they had to talk to them in order to be able to generate a quote. They then manually go into Jobber and add the line items, add their services to a quote, and manually send that quote to the customer. After the fact, we can use, again, just a form on their website, but instead it has a couple of additional steps that ask them those questions that I was talking about, right? That does three things behind the scenes. It calculates how much it's going to cost. It then adds the quote into the system already for the client, right? Mm-hmm. And then sends that linked with that quote with a personalized email directly to that customer. So now they have in their system, without any manual entry, they have that quote in their system, an email sent to the customer without doing anything, and the customer has done everything. Their day-to-day at that point is focused on service delivery, right? They've really automated their lead intake and quote delivery at that point. So back to the lead to cash pipeline, you're now halfway through that lead to cash pipeline without touching anything manually.
It's the difference between sitting down to, I got to make a dozen phone calls to hopefully get some business, to sitting down and seeing, okay, these are the people that scheduled with us and paid us. So let's just, get John to go take care of that, or whatever you have to do at that point. So that's a much more appealing scenario for a day-to-day business.
Something really cool I'm working on right now. I actually heard on another episode that you had, was related to AI. So today, I'll help people put systems in place to be able to automate responses to leads, right? At least they heard back from somebody, right? Mm-hmm. We talk, and that's where that sub 2 minutes comes in. But I'm working with a couple of platforms to be able to implement solutions which will actually dial out using an AI agent, and to be able to
Hmm.
qualify those prospects, ask the
Yeah.
right questions, because there's a fine line when it comes to filling out information on a form, right? And you
Yeah.
can only ask so many questions to get binary information. Sometimes you need to ask kind of, subjective questions to be able to discern exactly what they need, especially when you get into, more like different trades, if you will, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm hoping, before the end of the year to have a solution in place that will, through text and voice, be able to get to that lead in less than 2 minutes. Because if I need something right now, right, I want an answer right now. And if somebody's calling me back in less than 2 minutes, again, I'm going to go with that person because they've already displayed a higher level of service than the person who
Yeah.
may take an hour or 2 hours. So I think with the evolution of these solutions, we're going to see kind of this race to who can implement them the quickest, because the fastest response, as long as you're not a crazy price and as long as you can deliver and you get, you have good reviews and things like that. If everything else is table stakes, who gets back to somebody the quickest is going to win.
Yeah. Well, and I like the ability to call and talk to someone, even if it is an AI bot. A lot of people don't like typing. They're not fast at it, or it's just
Sure.
painful to think of it that way. Conversation comes much more naturally. They can
Right.
describe the problem, and then they feel better because now they've explained it, and you have the information you need, so you can move forward.
Sure. And also depending on the demographic that you serve, right?
True. Hmm.
You have, we'll call it you could say, do we have the TikTok demographic, the Instagram demographic, or the Facebook demographic? Each of those types of people communicate differently, right?
Right.
And so you have people who don't want to fill out an online form, don't want to send a text message. You have people that would prefer to pick up the phone. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have people that are nervous to talk on the phone or
Yes.
nervous to call people, right? And so for
Yeah.
those, and so I feel like as long as you are providing this breadth of options to enable people to communicate with you on their terms, and you can service them and communicate with them how they like, you're going to be in a better position to win than, say, just having a phone number on your website, just having
Right.
a chat bot on your website, just having a form on your website, right? If you have all of those
Yeah.
things that ultimately route back to the same place and deliver that same level of experience with just a different medium, you're going to be better off.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, what are some of the mistakes you see that owners might make when they try to implement some of these things on their own?
So I end up connecting with people when they've done one of two things. They've tried to do something and then they've broken it, right? And it's ended up introducing more problems to their business. And that's the hardest thing to talk to people about, because they believe they've tried something and it hasn't worked, right? They'll say, "Oh, I tried to automate this and it ended up breaking more often than not, and I didn't know when something was wrong, and so I've just been burned by it before, so I'm going to stick to what I've always done because I know that, you know that either pen and paper works, or this random Google sheet that I dumped the last 3 years of information in is, it works for me. It's not great, right? And they're usually frustrated, right? Or then the other side of it is things have gotten so bad because they are, working 80 hours a week. They are, stressed. They never see their family. They are pushed to the point of manual exhaustion and manual processes that they desperately need it. But then they sometimes can't take the time to slow down to
Hmm.
actually talk through what needs to be done. Right? Both of those types of people is who I end up talking to and working with. Yeah.
Gotcha.
The ones
And do
that can do it on their own, they typically do it
Mhm.
on their own until they get to a point where they want to bring in somebody from the outside to help them kind of take it to the next level and manage it professionally. Those
Right.
folks are, typically in the, high seven figure range, right? They're pushing, close to 10 million.
So when you come in, do these businesses already have consolidated software like Jobber, or do they have separate scheduling, billing, CRM, inventory?
It's a kind of a mix, right? So some people have like a smattering of tools that they use. Other people have a gap, right? So they might have a system for this and a system for that, but they have a few gaps over here. And I'm a huge fan, and I'll preach this all day long. I'm a huge fan of using the right tool for the right job. I'm not a fan of having a Swiss Army knife solution,
Mm.
right? Because the analogy that I use is, listen, I can go get a really big wrench to pound a nail into the wall to hang a picture, but I would be better off and get a better result if I used a hammer, right? You can get it done, but it's not going to give you the result that you want, right? And I love using that analogy because the companies that I'm talking to, right, they all have tools within their trade, and they all have
Mm.
tools that they have sitting there that they use 3 times a year because they need that specific tool for that specific job, right?
Right.
So when I use that analogy, they get it, right? And so sometimes it's helping them implement a new tool, a new application to help them do something within their business that they weren't able to effectively do before. Other times it's helping connect disconnected systems. And I'd say that's the majority of what I end up helping them do, because inconsistent data doesn't deliver great results, right? And so if you have, a bit of information over here and a bit of information over there, and you're swivel chairing to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
that's in sync and to be able to reference information from system A to move to system B, that's lost time all day long, right? So I'll give you a real world example on this. So specifically going back to Jobber customers, I developed an application called Adhesion Connect that helps Jobber customers integrate Jobber with the other tools that they use. If we assume that each event that happens would have taken them 5 minutes to do manually, the average Adhesion Connect customer saved 79.8 hours last week alone, just in the integrations that they were able to implement because of
Mm-hmm.
this tool. That's 2 full-time employees that they would have
Yeah.
had to have if they were manually swivel chairing this information. So while it's not as sexy sometimes as, hey, you just closed 10 more deals, if you think about the payroll cost of that, that is really sexy at that point.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
I'd
And
imagine
that's
that's part of the conversation in terms of prioritizing which integrations will give them the biggest ROI first. You talked about,
sure.
quickest time to respond versus some of this stuff that they're just wasting time on admin tasks or back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So that's a great example. And I
Yep.
was curious too if there's any specific platforms you use a lot. Like, do you use N8N or Make or Zapier, or do you kind of funnel people towards a certain platform that has multiple features?
Yeah, I find N8N scares the average service company,
Okay.
um, just because it looks too. It's the UI is a little too developer friendly, right? If that makes
Okay. Yeah.
sense.
Yes, it
And
does.
so they get scared by that. Most of what I end up doing and building and using is within Make.com, and then you have kind of these platforms kind of on the outside. So a lot of times I'll couple. Um, you have these individual tools, these individual systems, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
use Make.com to orchestrate the integrations, the automations between these systems. Once in a while, there's not a system for the job that needs to be done. When it comes to that, I'll end up layering in something like an Airtable, right? Or
Okay.
even like a more robust database solution with some backend processing, based on the scale of what's needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
To build something custom for what their particular requirements are, right? N8N is good, and the only time I end up going with N8N is when we have to leverage like real code, right? Because
Okay.
you can run actual like a JavaScript scripts in N8N, whereas with Make you have to take it outside of Make for a second and bring it back in, type of a thing. So I literally just an hour ago had a conversation with somebody about this exact same thing, and they're moving to N8N. And I kind of questioned their decision why they were moving to N8N, and I told them, like, that's, you can go there, as long as you have the team to be able to handle it after
Right.
the fact, right? So
Yeah, well, and that's an important thing to consider as well when you're automating this stuff. It's not necessarily just a set it and forget it situation. You need to have a plan in place to monitor and manage this. So whether that's
yeah,
with your vendor like Adhesion Co or someone on your team who's knowledgeable of how to keep these things working and updated.
yeah, I'd say I don't have a hard stat on this. If I had to kind of pull it out of my hat, I'd say probably 20% of the folks that we end up working with enter into like a professional services agreement with us.
Wow.
That really, I've tried to listen to customer requirements and listen to what customers need over the last few years growing Adhesion, instead of just building something that I thought was cool and then hoping people would buy it, right? And so,
Yeah.
pivoted over the last 2 years to really deliver solutions that they want. And that was actually one of them that you bring up right now. So we have a service called Managed Operations that does just that. It manages and monitor being the most important thing, a customer's integrations. And we do that by integrating it with our ticketing system. So not when, but if something goes wrong, it automatically raises a ticket in our system and we can flag it. We don't have to wait until a week goes by and they wonder why their leads aren't coming in. We don't have to wait until a week goes by and they wonder why, their jobs aren't being synced with their project management tool. We don't have to wait for any of those things, right? The majority of the time, they are none the wiser that something broke, right? And that's what a lot of people don't realize is these are not set it and forget it things. These are, you build it and you have to monitor it, because it's not that we built something that was wrong. It's that these systems change over time. The way that they send data, they update their APIs, right? Things will happen. And so having a partner in place to be able to address those things. And then the other part of it too is once you automate, say, one thing, 6 things, 10 things, you end up kind of changing your perspective on your business to be able to identify and find other opportunities where your time is being sucked up or where you have an inefficient process that could leverage automation. And so part of that service actually includes ongoing development. And so you can go hire somebody on Fiverr, you can go hire somebody on Upwork, but every time you do that, you're having to retell your business story. You're having to re-explain your processes. So having a true partner in place that already knows your business, that already understands your processes, that knows where the skeletons are buried in your automations and your integrations, right, exponentially increases the delivery of any new integration or any new automation. And I find that the people that really take advantage of that have a vastly different results than the people who just set it, forget it, and then hope that, it's for the good. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It made me think of like commercial airline flights. They're checking the plane in between every flight. If
thankfully,
you think about
right?
how often like these planes come, unload, load, take off again. They're in the air constantly, right?
Yeah.
But we don't do that with our cars at home. Like we maybe every few months get it checked out, and then like, oh, I've been driving on those brake pads that long. Like I almost died. Like, no, that's not acceptable, right? So with planes, like even if they delay you, like, hey, we're checking something out with the fuel line, will be just a few extra minutes. Like most people are like, I'm good with that. Like I'd rather have a successful flight. And so with even stuff like this inside your business, it's always cheaper to have a plan to keep it maintained and working before it really breaks, to catch stuff early. So I love that you're doing that.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Randy, this has been super valuable. I'd love your approach because you're not just selling automation for automation's sake. You're actually tying it to what matters in a business, and you're focused on creating these systems that are going to help the company scale profitably, sustainably, and you're even creating these things that they actually need, like the problems that they come up against. You're adding integration widgets for Jobber and stuff like that. So for those of you listening, if you're feeling like you're working in your business instead of on it, or if you're hitting those growth plateaus that Randy talked about, the things he shared today could be exactly what you need to kind of break through to that next level. So, Randy, for the people who want to learn more about Adhesion Co. and how you might be able to help their business, where should they go?
It's pretty simple. Adhesion.co, not .com, adhesion.co. And just jump on the website and get in touch.
And I would imagine they'd get a response in under 2 minutes, right?
They do. I actually have I have an AI agent. His name is Hermes. He's continuing to be developed, but my AI agent, Hermes, because he's the messenger, he's the Greek god of messenger, Hermes will be in touch.
He's fast.
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. All right, guys at home, thank you for listening. The businesses that scale successfully aren't the ones with the best technicians or the lowest prices necessarily. They are the ones with the best systems. That's how you're going to go from surviving to thriving. And I got to remind myself of this too. So I'm always looking for ways to improve because you're never there. Stuff's always coming out that you can improve with. So if you know someone who would benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. And thanks again for listening. Thank you for being here, Randy. Keep building those systems, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Digital Dominance. If you enjoyed this episode, would you do me a big favor and leave a review? It really helps more service business owners discover the show, fix their websites, and grow their businesses the right way.